Imagine a Soviet nuclear submarine packed with ballistic missiles and top-secret code books lying broken on the seafloor 3 miles down in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Now imagine the CIA deciding, yeah, we're going to steal that. That's Project Azorian, a covert operation so ambitious it sounds like science fiction. In the early 1970s, at the height of the Cold War, the United States tried to raise an entire Soviet submarine, K-129, right under Moscow's nose. The mission involved a fake deep-sea mining project, a custom-built megaship funded through billionaire Howard Hughes, and technology that had simply never existed before. For decades, almost everything about it was classified. Tonight, we're diving into how this insane plan came together, what the CIA actually recovered, and why, to this day, officials still refuse to tell the full story. This is the true, unbelievable tale of Project Azorian. To understand Project Azorian, we need to step back into the Cold War mindset. It's 1968. The US and the Soviet Union are locked in a nuclear standoff, and every scrap of information about the other side's missiles, codes, and submarine technology could tip the balance. When a Soviet ballistic missile submarine suddenly disappears in the middle of the Pacific, both superpowers start hunting. Only one finds it: the United States. What follows is a secret race, not to rescue sailors, but to recover hardware and secrets from 3 miles down. In this video, we'll unpack the timeline, the engineering, the politics, and the cover-up, all the way to how the truth finally leaked. If you're into deep dive stories like this, consider subscribing and tapping the notification bell so you don't miss future episodes. And watch till the end for the surprising way this mission still shapes modern intelligence. Our story begins with disaster. On March 8, 1968, the Soviet Gulf II-class ballistic missile submarine K-129 fails to report in. It's armed with 3 nuclear-tipped missiles and a crew of around 98 men. Somewhere north of Hawaii, deep beneath the waves, something goes catastrophically wrong. The Soviets launch massive search efforts but find nothing. Officially, K-129 just vanishes. Unofficially, the U.S. Navy's underwater listening network, SOSUS, has heard something, a distinct acoustic event consistent with a submarine loss. Using those sound signatures, the U.S. triangulates the likely resting place of the sub, over 16,000 feet down in international waters. That's important. It means no one legally owns the wreck. For the U.S. intelligence community, this isn't just a tragedy, it's an opportunity. If they can find K-129, they may be able to access Soviet nuclear warheads, cryptographic equipment, and secret documents, treasure beyond imagining in the Cold War. Finding a submarine 3 miles down is one problem. Lifting it is another. First, the U.S. has to confirm the wreck is actually there. In 1968, the Navy sends the spy sub USS Halibut, equipped with cameras and search gear, to the suspected area. After painstaking grid searches, Halibut's crew photographs twisted metal, debris, and eventually the broken hull of K-129 lying on the seafloor. These grainy black and white images make their way to the CIA. The question shifts from, is it there, to can we get it? Lifting thousands of tons of steel from 16,500 feet was something no one had ever done. The water pressure alone is crushing. Traditional salvage was impossible. But the prize, Soviet missile systems, guidance technology, and code materials, was irresistible. Within Langley, planners begin sketching a mission so extreme it almost defies belief, one that will become codenamed Project Azorian. From the beginning, Azorian was about more than engineering. It was about secrecy. The CIA knew that if the Soviets learned the US was targeting K-129, there could be diplomatic or even military consequences, so they needed a cover story big enough to hide a global-scale salvage operation. The answer: deep ocean mining. In the late 1960s, scientists were excited about manganese nodules, metal-rich rocks scattered across the seafloor. The CIA realized they could pretend to be building a ship to scoop up these nodules while secretly designing it to grab a submarine. Enter Howard Hughes, the eccentric billionaire and aviation pioneer. His name and his reputation for wild projects were perfect camouflage. Publicly, Hughes would be developing a revolutionary mining vessel. Privately, the CIA would be funding and controlling almost everything through shell companies and classified contracts to keep Project Azorian invisible from both the Soviets and the American public. The centerpiece of Azorian was a ship that shouldn't have existed, the Hughes Glomar Explorer. On paper, it was a commercial vessel designed to scoop up mineral nodules from the deep ocean floor. In reality, it was a purpose-built spy platform, one of the most complex ships ever made. At over 600 feet long, Glomar featured a massive central moon pool, an opening in the hull, to lower and raise equipment in secret, shielded from prying eyes. Beneath the ship, engineers planned to suspend a colossal mechanical claw, the capture vehicle, on a string of steel pipes stretching 3 miles down. Everything had to withstand crushing pressure, ocean currents, and the immense weight of the submarine section they hoped to lift. The ship also needed dynamic positioning systems to hover precisely over the wreck. Each of these challenges had no precedent. The CIA, partnering with industry giants, was inventing deep-sea engineering in real time. Designing a claw big enough to grab a submarine was like building a skyscraper that operated upside down, underwater. Engineers conceived the capture vehicle as a huge steel framework with multiple articulated fingers that would descend, envelop a midsection of K-129, and lock around it. That entire structure had to be lowered on a pipe string assembled piece by piece on the ship, each segment carefully threaded while Glomar held position over the wreck. The steel pipes alone weighed thousands of tons. If any part failed, claw, joints, or pipes, the sub could slip, shatter, or tear free. On top of that, the CIA wanted the operation to be as covert as possible. Every movement had to look like mining work. Even those aboard the ship didn't all know the true mission. Much of the crew believed they were part of a legitimate ocean mining experiment, not a daring attempt to steal a Soviet nuclear submarine. By mid-1974, after years of planning and construction, the Glomar Explorer sailed into the Pacific toward the hidden grave of K-129. On the surface, it looked like a high-tech industrial ship conducting scientific work. Below deck, CIA and contractor teams prepared for one of the most intricate operations in maritime history. Once over the wreck site, Glomar's dynamic positioning thrusters fought wind and currents to keep the ship almost perfectly still. Crews began assembling the long pipe string, lowering the capture vehicle slowly through the moon pool and down into the deep. This process took days, with every connection monitored, every vibration analyzed. Far below, guided by sonar and cameras, the claw descended toward the twisted remains of K-129. All the while, the Soviets remained unaware that above their sunken submarine, a U.S. spy ship was quietly attempting to pluck their lost nuclear asset off the ocean floor. Deep below, the capture vehicle reached its target. Using remote sensors and cameras, operators maneuvered the claw around a central section of K-129, carefully avoiding debris and unstable structures. Once in place, the fingers closed, locking onto the sub's hull. The next phase was the most dangerous, the lift. Slowly, winches and heave-compensating systems began reeling in the pipe string, transferring unimaginable loads through steel welds and joints. Every foot upward increased tension. Engineers worried about metal fatigue, unknown weaknesses, and the submarine's own deteriorated condition. After years under crushing pressure, could K-129 survive being moved? For a time, everything appeared to go according to plan. Instruments showed the capture vehicle holding. The massive, invisible weight rose from the seafloor toward the surface. If the system worked, the CIA would achieve the most audacious intelligence coup of the Cold War without firing a shot. Then, somewhere during the long ascent, disaster struck. Sensors on the Glomar Explorer registered a sudden change in load. Something massive had broken free. Deep below, part of the capture structure failed, and most of K-129 slipped from the claw, crashing back to the seafloor in a cloud of silt and debris. Only a relatively small section of the submarine, still gripped by the remaining arms, continued rising. On deck, crews realized they would not be recovering the full vessel or all its prize compartments. But aborting the mission entirely wasn't an option. Too much had been risked. They pressed on, bringing the surviving fragment into the moon pool, out of sight from any satellites or passing Soviet ships. The Glomar Explorer had spent a fortune and years of effort to pull up only a fraction of its target. Yet even that fraction might hold secrets worth the cost. What exactly the CIA recovered from K-129 remains one of the most closely guarded aspects of Project Azorian. Declassified documents confirm that at least part of the bow section was brought aboard. Official accounts mention nuclear torpedoes and the bodies of several Soviet sailors who were later given a formal burial at sea with full military honors, remarkably recorded on film. The intelligence take is murkier. Some reports suggest that cryptographic materials or missile guidance systems were examined. Others, including former officials, hint that the haul was significant but not game-changing. Still, even partial access to Soviet hardware helped U.S. analysts understand design philosophies, safety protocols, and potential vulnerabilities. The CIA, however, refused to confirm details invoking national security. For them, Azorian wasn't just about this one submarine. It was about preserving the methods and capabilities that made such an operation possible in the first place. For a mission so secret, Project Azorian left an unusually public footprint. Building the Glomar Explorer had drawn media curiosity from the start. Howard Hughes, deep-sea mining, massive budgets. In the mid-1970s, investigative reporters at outlets like the Los Angeles Times and later the New York Times began sniffing around. Leaks from within the government hinted that the ship's true purpose wasn't mining at all. The CIA scrambled to contain the story. When journalist Harriet Ann Philippi filed a Freedom of Information Act request about the Glomar Explorer, the CIA responded with a now famous line: they could neither confirm nor deny the existence of records. That evasive phrase, born from the need to protect Azorian, became known as the Glomar response and is still used by U.S. agencies today. Ironically, an operation built on secrecy ended up reshaping how the government talks about secrecy itself. The Soviets, for their part, eventually realized something strange had happened over K-129's grave. Declassified Soviet naval records and later memoirs suggest they suspected, though couldn't prove, that the Americans had attempted a recovery. The U.S. never officially admitted it. Decades later, in the 1990s, the CIA quietly released a portion of a video, the burial at sea for the recovered Soviet sailors, with their flag draped over coffins, prayers read in Russian, and the ship's crew standing at attention. That gesture was partly humanitarian, partly diplomatic theater. By then, the Cold War was over, but Azorian remained mostly in the shadows. Historians and analysts have since argued over whether the mission was worth its astronomical cost, around $800 million in 1970s dollars, in operational risk. Yet nearly all agree, in scope, ambition, and secrecy, Project Azorian stands alone in the annals of naval and intelligence history. Stepping back, Project Azorian offers several big lessons. First, it shows the extreme superpowers were willing to reach during the Cold War, spending nearly $1 billion to grab a single submarine, all to gain a sliver of advantage. Second, it highlights how intelligence work isn't just spies and codes, it's also engineering, logistics, and industrial-scale deception. The Glomar Explorer wasn't just a ship, it was a floating billion-dollar cover story. Third, Azorian left a legal and cultural legacy. The Glomar response changed how agencies handle secrets in the age of transparency laws. And finally, the mission illustrates a paradox. Some of the most extraordinary operations in history are designed so that, ideally, no one ever hears about them. When we do, it's usually decades later, through partial documents, redacted videos, and the stubborn curiosity of journalists and historians. If you've stayed with this story all the way from the disappearance of K-129 to the Glomar response, you now know why Project Azorian is often called the most ambitious covert salvage operation ever attempted. A fake mining venture, a secret billion-dollar ship, a colossal mechanical claw, a partial failure that still rewrote intelligence playbooks. That's the kind of history that deserves more than a paragraph in a textbook. If you enjoy deep cinematic dives into hidden episodes like this, Consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the notification bell so you'll know when the next story drops. Share this video with someone who loves Cold War or naval history and let me know in the comments. Was Azorian worth the risk and cost, or was it an over-engineered gamble? And if you want to follow up, we can explore other secret undersea operations that almost no one talks about.